She chose her unstable ex over building a life with me, so I quietly accepted that dream job in Singapore and disappeared from her world entirely. Looking back now, I can see how perfectly everything fell into place, though it definitely didn't feel that way when I was living through it. I met Vanessa Chun at my coworker Derek's housewarming party in Phoenix back in March, one of those sprawling suburban gatherings where you end up talking to strangers about everything except what you actually do for work. I was nursing my second beer and trying to look interested in Derek's new smart home setup when she walked over and made some joke about how his voice-activated lights probably had worse security than a gas station ATM. That got my attention immediately since cybersecurity was literally my day job, and we ended up spending the next 3 hours dissecting everything wrong with consumer IoT devices while everyone else argued about the Suns' playoff chances. Vanessa worked as a financial consultant for a mid-sized firm downtown, specializing in retirement planning for healthcare workers, but her real passion was cryptocurrency and alternative investments. She had this 5-year plan to launch her own consulting firm focused on helping young professionals navigate the digital asset landscape, complete with detailed market projections and client acquisition strategies that honestly impressed me. We started meeting for coffee twice a week to discuss blockchain technology and portfolio diversification theory, conversations that gradually shifted from professional curiosity to something more personal as we discovered our shared obsession with true crime documentaries and terrible Netflix sci-fi movies. Those late-night texting sessions about whether Bitcoin would hit 6 figures turned into phone calls that lasted until 2 a.m., covering everything from our college experiences to family dynamics to those weird recurring dreams that everyone has but nobody talks about. Vanessa had this way of making even mundane topics feel engaging, whether she was explaining the psychological factors behind market volatility or analyzing the plot holes in whatever ridiculous alien invasion movie we just watched. About 6 weeks into whatever we were calling this relationship, she opened up about her ex-boyfriend Caleb during one of our coffee dates, describing their 2-year relationship as emotionally exhausting and financially chaotic. According to her, Caleb was one of those day traders who treated the stock market like a casino, constantly chasing high-risk plays and celebrating massive wins one day only to lose everything the next week. She told me how he would disappear for days during bad trading streaks, then resurface with elaborate plans to recover his losses through even riskier investments, creating this constant cycle of anxiety and false hope that left her feeling like she was dating a gambling addict. Vanessa said she'd spent months trying to help him develop more conservative strategies and better risk management, but he interpreted her concern as lack of faith in his abilities, leading to explosive arguments about money, trust, and whether she truly understood the entrepreneurial mindset. When they finally broke up 8 months ago, she felt simultaneously relieved and guilty, wondering if she'd given up too easily on someone who just needed more support and patience. I found myself becoming her emotional anchor during those vulnerable conversations, listening to her process the relationship trauma while offering the stability and reliability that had been missing with Caleb. Where he was impulsive and unpredictable, I was methodical and consistent, showing up exactly when I said I would and following through on every commitment without drama or excuses. Vanessa seemed genuinely grateful for that dependability, often commenting on how refreshing it was to date someone who didn't create artificial crises or treat every disagreement like a personal attack on their character. I helped her research business loan options for her consulting firm, reviewed her marketing materials, and even built a basic website for her practice, investments of time and energy that felt natural because I genuinely believed in her vision and wanted to support her success. Looking back, I can see how those early months established a pattern where I consistently prioritized her needs and goals while she accepted my support as something she deserved rather than appreciated, but at the time it just felt like being a good boyfriend to someone who'd been through a difficult situation. The first Singapore offer came in September, exactly when Vanessa and I were discussing moving in together and she was finalizing her business plan for the consulting firm. TechSecure Global had been courting me for months about leading their cybersecurity division for a massive Southeast Asian expansion, complete with a housing allowance that would cover a luxury apartment in Marina Bay, full visa sponsorship, and a salary package that was honestly life-changing money. I was excited about the opportunity to work on international banking security protocols and build something meaningful from the ground up, but when I brought it up over dinner at our usual Italian place, Vanessa immediately started listing all the reasons why the timing was terrible. She explained how leaving Phoenix now would essentially destroy the client relationships she'd spent 2 years building, particularly with several physician groups who were finally ready to commit to comprehensive financial planning services. Her argument made sense on the surface since she was just 6 months away from having enough capital and clients to launch her own firm, but I noticed she seemed more anxious than disappointed, like the idea of international adventure was genuinely terrifying rather than just inconvenient. I told TechSecure I needed more time to consider their offer, thinking maybe we could figure out a way to make long-distance work or explore options for Vanessa to eventually join me once her business was established. But their recruiter made it clear this was a limited window opportunity that wouldn't wait indefinitely. The second offer came in November with an even sweeter package including relocation expenses and a signing bonus, coinciding with what Vanessa described as Caleb's mental health crisis that required her immediate emotional support. Apparently he'd lost a significant amount of money in some high-risk cryptocurrency trades and was reaching out to mutual friends expressing suicidal thoughts. Though I noticed these crises seemed to align perfectly with moments when Vanessa and I were making serious relationship progress. She started spending hours each evening on encrypted messaging apps, claiming she was the only person Caleb trusted enough to talk him through his darkest moments, and she couldn't abandon someone who was genuinely struggling just to pursue some fantasy life in Asia. I found it interesting how Caleb had managed to insert himself back into Vanessa's daily routine through what appeared to be harmless professional networking, starting with LinkedIn connection requests and cryptocurrency forum discussions where he would share market insights and investment tips that Vanessa found genuinely valuable. Their digital interactions gradually expanded to include gaming platforms where they'd play online poker together while discussing trading strategies, Discord servers focused on blockchain technology where Caleb would moderate investment discussions, and eventually private video calls where he'd walk her through complex market analysis that she claimed was helping her better serve her own clients. Vanessa insisted these interactions were purely platonic and professionally beneficial, pointing out that Caleb's expertise in alternative investments was exactly the knowledge she needed to differentiate her consulting practice from traditional financial advisors. She showed me screenshots of their conversations to prove nothing inappropriate was happening, but I noticed how their exchanges had this intimate familiarity that went beyond professional courtesy, filled with inside jokes and references to shared experiences that made me feel like an outsider looking in on their private world. When TechSecure made their third and final offer in January with a March start date, adding stock options and a guaranteed promotion track, Vanessa became genuinely defensive about my even considering it. She accused me of using the Singapore opportunity as an ultimatum to force her to choose between her career goals and our relationship, suggesting that any man who truly loved her would understand why this timing was impossible and find ways to support her dreams instead of pursuing his own selfish ambitions. The conversation happened during what should have been a celebration dinner for her landing 2 new corporate clients, but instead turned into an analysis of my character and commitment level that left me questioning whether she actually saw a future with me or just appreciated having a reliable support system. I realized that every major decision in our relationship had been filtered through what worked best for Vanessa's timeline and priorities, while my career advancement and personal goals were treated as secondary considerations that could be postponed indefinitely if they created any inconvenience for her plans. That night I called TechSecure and asked for a 2-week extension to make my final decision, knowing I needed to have one more serious conversation with Vanessa about what we both actually wanted from this relationship and whether we were building something together or just coexisting until better opportunities came along. The conversation that changed everything happened at Morton's Steakhouse, the same place where we'd celebrated her first major client acquisition 6 months earlier, but this time the atmosphere felt charged with unspoken tension rather than shared excitement about our future. I waited until after we'd ordered to bring up my concerns about her constant communication with Caleb, explaining how their daily interactions seemed to consume more of her emotional energy than our actual relationship, but Vanessa immediately became defensive and accused me of displaying toxic possessiveness that reminded her of controlling behavior from previous relationships. She insisted that supporting someone through a genuine mental health crisis was basic human decency, and she wasn't going to abandon Caleb just because I felt insecure about their friendship, especially when his cryptocurrency expertise was genuinely helping her develop more sophisticated investment strategies for her consulting practice. According to Vanessa, my inability to trust her judgment about maintaining professional relationships with former partners revealed deeper character flaws that would eventually destroy our relationship anyway. So maybe it was better to address these issues now rather than pretend everything was fine. She told me that healthy relationships required both partners to maintain independent social circles and professional networks, and she wouldn't tolerate being with someone who expected her to cut off valuable connections just to manage his own emotional insecurities about her past. The conversation escalated when I pointed out that Caleb's mental health crises seemed to coincide perfectly with important moments in our relationship, but Vanessa dismissed this observation as paranoid conspiracy thinking that proved I didn't understand how trauma and recovery actually worked in real-world situations. She explained that people in crisis often reach out when they see others moving forward with their lives, and it was completely normal for Caleb to need extra support when he witnessed her success and happiness with someone new, which should make me feel proud rather than threatened. When I suggested that maybe some boundaries would be healthy for everyone involved, Vanessa accused me of trying to isolate her from support systems and friendships that existed long before our relationship began, behavior she characterized as classic emotional manipulation disguised as reasonable concern. She said she'd learned to recognize these red flags after her previous relationship with someone who gradually convinced her to distance herself from friends and family members who supposedly had negative influences on their partnership. The final blow came when she declared that she refused to abandon someone who was going through financial ruin and emotional breakdown just to appease my insecurities, especially when that person had been an important part of her life for years before I ever appeared in the picture. Her exact words were that if I couldn't handle her maintaining meaningful friendships with people who knew her history and supported her professional development, then maybe we weren't as compatible as she'd initially thought. And perhaps we both needed to seriously evaluate whether this relationship was meeting our actual needs. I sat there for a long moment, watching her scroll through her phone while waiting for me to respond with the usual apologies and promises to work on my trust issues, but instead I simply said fair enough and asked for the check. That night, after Vanessa fell asleep while texting someone on her encrypted messaging app, I opened my laptop and formally accepted TechSecure's Singapore offer with a start date of March 15th, exactly 6 weeks away, giving me enough time to organize my departure without creating unnecessary drama or complications. I spent the next hour researching temporary housing options through the company's relocation service and reviewing the visa paperwork requirements, feeling this strange combination of relief and anticipation that told me I was making the right decision even if the timing felt abrupt. The final confrontation happened 3 days later when Vanessa announced over breakfast that she needed to take a relationship sabbatical to focus on helping Caleb launch his new trading consultancy, which apparently required her undivided attention and emotional support during this critical startup phase. She explained that she couldn't give our relationship the energy it deserved while managing such an important professional opportunity that could revolutionize her own career prospects if Caleb's venture succeeded as projected. According to her, this temporary break would actually strengthen our bond by allowing her to fully commit to this business opportunity without feeling guilty about neglecting my needs or creating resentment about divided priorities. She suggested we could revisit our relationship in a few months once Caleb's consultancy was established and she could return her focus to building something meaningful with me, assuming we both still felt the same connection after having some space to evaluate our long-term compatibility. I told Vanessa that sounded like a reasonable plan and wished her luck with the consultancy project, then spent the next 6 weeks executing the most strategically planned disappearance of my adult life. The beauty of being a cybersecurity analyst is that you develop excellent skills in operational security and leaving minimal digital footprints, capabilities that proved extremely useful when organizing a complete life transition without creating unnecessary drama or complications. I started by gradually transferring my active client projects to colleagues, framing it as workload redistribution to prepare for a major system upgrade that would require my full attention for several months, which wasn't technically untrue since implementing international banking security protocols definitely qualified as a major system upgrade. My manager had been expecting my departure since TechSecure's initial recruitment attempts were hardly secret in our industry, so he was completely supportive of my transition timeline and even helped expedite the client handover process to ensure everything wrapped up smoothly before my March departure date. Meanwhile, Vanessa was increasingly absent from our shared downtown condo, spending entire weekends at what she described as intensive business strategy sessions with Caleb, reviewing market research and developing comprehensive trading algorithms that would form the foundation of their revolutionary investment approach. She would return from these sessions energized and optimistic about the consultancy's potential, sharing elaborate projections about client acquisition and revenue growth that honestly sounded more like fantasy than business planning, but I nodded along and asked supportive questions while secretly researching real estate agents and storage facilities. The condo we'd been sharing belonged to Vanessa's family trust, but I'd been contributing to the mortgage and utilities for over a year, so I quietly contacted a lawyer to understand my financial obligations and ensure I could exit cleanly without creating legal complications or ongoing financial entanglements. Within 2 weeks, I'd arranged to have my share of household expenses covered through the end of our lease term, effectively buying myself a clean break without the hassle of awkward financial negotiations or claims about abandonment. I listed my furniture and electronics on various marketplace apps, telling buyers I was relocating for work and needed everything gone quickly, which generated enough interest to clear out most of my belongings within 3 weeks while providing some extra cash for relocation expenses. The few items with sentimental value went into a climate-controlled storage unit near the airport, giving me the option to retrieve them later or have them shipped to Singapore once I was fully settled. My friends noticed the obvious tension between Vanessa and me during our final social gatherings, but I deflected their questions by focusing on work stress and the complexity of international project management, which was technically accurate even if it wasn't the complete picture of what was happening. Vanessa had become surprisingly open about discussing her rekindled friendship with Caleb on social media, posting photos from their business meetings and sharing articles about cryptocurrency trading with comments about learning from the best mentors in the industry, behavior that made our mutual friends uncomfortable but confirmed my suspicions about where her priorities actually lay. During the final week of February, while Vanessa traveled to Las Vegas for what she described as an exclusive investment seminar hosted by Caleb's new consultancy, I had my colleague Derek handle the lease transfer paperwork and coordinate with the moving company to ship my remaining belongings to Singapore via expedited freight service. I left a brief note explaining that I'd accepted a position overseas and wished her genuine success with her new business venture, along with contact information for the building management company and a forwarded address for any mail that might arrive in my name over the next few months. By the time Vanessa returned from Las Vegas with stories about groundbreaking trading strategies and revolutionary market insights, I was already halfway across the Pacific Ocean, settling into my temporary corporate housing in Marina Bay and preparing for my first day at TechSecure's regional headquarters. Singapore exceeded every expectation I'd had about international living, from the efficiency of public transportation to the incredible diversity of food options available at hawker centers throughout the city. My role as regional cybersecurity director involved designing protection protocols for major banking institutions across Southeast Asia, work that was genuinely challenging and meaningful in ways that my previous position had never been, especially when I realized how critical financial security was for developing economies trying to establish trust in digital banking systems. The TechSecure team welcomed me immediately, inviting me to rooftop networking events in the financial district where I met professionals from dozens of countries who were all working on similarly ambitious international projects that made my previous job feel small and provincial by comparison. Weekends became adventures rather than obligations as I explored Malaysia by train, discovered amazing street food in Little India, and learned to navigate the complex cultural dynamics of a truly multicultural city where English, Mandarin, Malay, and Tamil all coexisted naturally. My new colleagues organized sailing excursions around the harbor islands every few weeks, introducing me to the local yacht club scene and teaching me basic navigation skills while we discussed everything from blockchain implementation to the best coffee shops in each district. Within 2 months, I felt more intellectually stimulated and socially engaged than I had during the entire previous year in Phoenix, finally understanding how much emotional energy I'd been wasting on someone who treated our relationship as a convenient backup plan rather than a genuine partnership. Meanwhile, Derek and other mutual friends provided regular updates about Vanessa and Caleb's increasingly public relationship, complete with social media posts about their power couple trading strategies and photos from expensive restaurants that definitely exceeded what a struggling financial consultant and day trader should have been able to afford. According to the updates I received, Vanessa had pivoted her entire professional brand to focus on cryptocurrency and alternative investments, claiming that traditional financial planning was becoming obsolete in the digital economy and that forward-thinking advisors needed to embrace more aggressive strategies to serve their clients effectively. She and Caleb were apparently co-hosting webinars about wealth building through high-risk trading, posting testimonials from satisfied clients who'd supposedly achieved massive returns by following their revolutionary investment approach, and building an online community of aspiring day traders who paid monthly subscription fees for access to their exclusive market analysis. The transformation from conservative financial consultant to cryptocurrency evangelist seemed remarkably rapid, but I felt genuine relief rather than jealousy when I saw these updates, because it confirmed that Vanessa had found exactly what she was looking for in terms of excitement and validation from someone who shared her appetite for risk and drama. My own life had become incredibly peaceful and productive without the constant underlying tension of wondering whether I was enough for someone who clearly needed more stimulation than a stable relationship could provide, and I finally understood how much mental bandwidth I'd been unconsciously dedicating to managing her moods and insecurities instead of pursuing my own goals and interests. The first indication that something was seriously wrong came through a LinkedIn message from Derek in August, 6 months after I'd settled into my Singapore routine, with a link to a Phoenix Business Journal article about federal investigators raiding several local financial services offices as part of a cryptocurrency fraud investigation. Vanessa's name appeared in the third paragraph as someone whose professional license had been suspended pending investigation into her role promoting what authorities described as an elaborate pyramid scheme disguised as a legitimate trading consultancy that had defrauded dozens of investors across Arizona and Nevada. According to the article, Caleb's revolutionary investment strategies had been operating as a classic Ponzi scheme where early investor returns were funded by new participant fees rather than actual trading profits, with sophisticated marketing materials and fabricated performance data designed to attract increasingly larger investments from trusting clients. The federal complaint detailed how Vanessa had unknowingly recruited several of her former financial planning clients into the scheme by leveraging their trust in her professional judgment and conservative track record, convincing them that cryptocurrency trading represented the future of wealth building and that traditional investment approaches were becoming obsolete in the digital economy. Investigators had traced over $2 million in investor funds that had been diverted through multiple shell companies controlled by Caleb, money that was supposedly being used for high-frequency trading operations but was actually funding his personal expenses including luxury car payments, expensive vacations, and the downtown Phoenix office space where he and Vanessa had been hosting their investor seminars. The most devastating revelation was that Vanessa had invested her entire business savings account, approximately $43,000 that represented 2 years of careful financial planning, into Caleb's fake trading fund just weeks before the federal investigation began, apparently believing his claims about guaranteed returns and exclusive investment opportunities. When authorities moved to freeze the consultancy's assets, Caleb disappeared overnight without warning, leaving behind fabricated trading records, worthless cryptocurrency wallets, and a series of encrypted communications that investigators were still attempting to decode as part of their ongoing criminal case. Vanessa found herself facing not only the complete loss of her life savings but also potential legal liability for her role in promoting fraudulent investments to clients who had trusted her professional recommendations, even though evidence suggested she had been genuinely unaware of the scheme's illegal nature. Her financial planning license suspension meant she couldn't legally practice while the investigation continued, effectively destroying the career she'd spent years building and leaving her without any legitimate source of income while facing mounting legal expenses and angry former clients who blamed her for their financial losses. The condo she'd inherited through her family trust went into foreclosure within 3 months since she couldn't maintain the mortgage payments without her professional income, and several of her former clients had initiated civil lawsuits seeking to recover their investment losses plus damages for what they characterized as professional negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. Derek told me that mutual friends were avoiding Vanessa entirely since news of the federal investigation had spread throughout Phoenix's financial services community, making her essentially radioactive from a professional networking perspective while she struggled to find even basic employment opportunities that didn't require financial industry background checks. Her family was reportedly struggling to provide emotional and financial support for someone who had ignored their warnings about Caleb's suspicious business practices and had repeatedly dismissed their concerns as jealousy or misunderstanding of modern investment strategies, creating additional strain on relationships that had already been damaged by her previous poor judgment about romantic partners. The first attempt at reconnection came through a carefully crafted LinkedIn message in September that appeared in my inbox alongside routine professional updates about banking security conferences and industry partnerships. Vanessa had clearly spent significant time composing the message, which struck a tone of casual professional networking while subtly hinting at personal regret and the desire to rebuild our connection, mentioning how much she'd learned from our previous conversations about risk management and how valuable my perspective would be for someone trying to rebuild their career after making serious professional mistakes. When I didn't respond within a week, she escalated to encrypted email addresses that she must have obtained through mutual contacts, sending increasingly desperate messages about missing my stability and wisdom while describing her current situation as a temporary setback that had taught her important lessons about trust and professional judgment. These emails gradually became more personal and emotional, with detailed explanations of how Caleb had manipulated her expertise and reputation to legitimize his fraudulent scheme, and how she now realized that leaving our relationship had been the biggest mistake of her life because I represented everything genuine and trustworthy that she should have valued instead of chasing excitement and validation. By October, when her digital outreach hadn't generated any response, Vanessa apparently hired a private investigator to locate my Singapore address and contact information, resulting in handwritten letters and care packages being delivered to my Marina Bay apartment building that made me grateful for the building's excellent security protocols. The letters contained increasingly frantic appeals for forgiveness and financial assistance, describing her deteriorating mental health and complete social isolation while suggesting that I had some moral obligation to help her recover from the consequences of choices she now acknowledged were completely wrong and selfish. She somehow obtained my mother's phone number back in Ohio and convinced her sister to call my parents, claiming that I had abandoned Vanessa during a mental health crisis and that my family needed to pressure me into taking responsibility for her current desperate situation. My mother called me extremely confused about why some stranger was demanding that I send money to Phoenix for someone I'd never mentioned having problems with, which led to an awkward conversation about why I hadn't shared details about the breakup and subsequent drama that had motivated my international career move. The situation escalated dramatically when Derek called to warn me that Vanessa had discovered I would be attending his wedding in November, and she had apparently purchased a plane ticket to Phoenix despite being unable to afford basic living expenses, suggesting she was planning some kind of dramatic confrontation or public scene designed to force a conversation. Derek and his fiancée were genuinely worried about their wedding being disrupted by Vanessa's increasingly erratic behavior, but they felt obligated to invite me since I'd been Derek's work mentor for 3 years and had helped him navigate several important career decisions that led to his current promotion and engagement. I assured Derek that I could handle whatever Vanessa might attempt and that their wedding was too important to let my personal drama create problems. Though privately I was curious about what someone in her desperate financial and legal situation hoped to accomplish through a public confrontation with someone who had clearly moved on. The confrontation itself happened exactly as I'd expected, during the cocktail hour when guests were mingling and taking photos, giving Vanessa the perfect audience for whatever performance she'd planned during her flight from Phoenix to whatever temporary housing situation she'd arranged for the weekend. She approached me while I was talking with Derek's college friends about Singapore's tech startup scene, immediately launching into a rehearsed speech about how she'd made terrible mistakes and learned valuable lessons about what really mattered in life, specifically referencing my reliability and emotional maturity as qualities she now understood were more important than excitement or adventure. Vanessa looked genuinely terrible, having lost significant weight and wearing clothes that suggested she was shopping at thrift stores rather than the designer boutiques she'd previously favored, but her desperation was still packaged in the same manipulative charm that had initially attracted me 3 years ago. She begged me to consider giving our relationship another chance, offering to relocate to Singapore if I could help her obtain a work visa or even temporary housing while she rebuilt her career in international financial services, apparently believing that geographic distance from her current problems would somehow reset our relationship dynamic. When I calmly explained that chapter of my life was permanently closed and that I wished her well in rebuilding her situation independently, she became increasingly frantic and started making claims about how our connection was too meaningful to abandon and how she'd learned to appreciate my stability and commitment after experiencing the chaos of choosing excitement over genuine partnership. The conversation ended when I politely but firmly told her that I needed to return to my life in Singapore and the meaningful work I was building there, leaving her standing alone in a cocktail dress she couldn't afford while I rejoined Derek's celebration with colleagues who represented the international professional network I'd developed since choosing career advancement over relationship drama.